right. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good? It's good. It's June. Feeling good about June? All right, great. Same-ish. Let's go ahead and close our eyes for just a moment. There's a part of the song that we're about to sing that we normally sing. It's the intro part of the song, but I just want to read that part as a prayer over us this morning as we get started. Christ as a light, illuminate and guide us. Christ as a shield, overshadow us. Christ under us, Christ over us, Christ beside us, on our left and our right. This day be within us and without us. You are lowly and meek, yet all-powerful. God, be in the heart of each to whom we speak, and also in the mouths of each who speaks unto us. This day be within and without us. You are lowly and meek, yet all-powerful. God, as we come to you this morning, that's our prayer. God, we ask that you be with us in every part of our day and everything that we do. We got on our time together this morning, God, that we would be aware of your nearness to us. That as we sing about your name and about your goodness and about your faithfulness, God, that we would know that you are close, that you are beside us, that you are all around us, that you are working in us, you are working in the world outside of us, God, that you are here, that you are good, that we can trust you. Will you stand and sing with us? Christ as a light, Christ as a shield, Christ when I'm standing, Christ when I need, Christ here beside me, on my left and my right, Christ all around me, all my days and my nights, Christ as a light, Christ as a shield, Christ when I'm standing, Christ when I need, Christ here beside me, on my left and my right, Christ all around me, all my days and my nights, Christ as a light, Christ as a shield, Christ when I'm standing, Christ when I need, Christ here beside me, on my left and my right, Christ all around me, all my days and my nights, Christ as a light, Christ as a shield, Christ when I'm standing, Christ when I need, Christ here beside me, on my left and my right, Christ all around me, all my days and my nights, Christ as a light, Christ as a shield, Christ when I'm standing, Christ when I need, Christ here beside me, on my left and my right, Christ all around me, all my days and my nights, Christ here beside me, on my left and my right, Christ all around me, all my days and my nights.
bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it rain. At your name, stand. Call the seas to stand, the rich to stand, let it rain. At your name, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, the silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Breathe, call these bones to live, call these lungs to sing once again. I will praise Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Silence fear. Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Your name is alive, and the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, and the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, the silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, 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 you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, the silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, Christ is alive. Christ is a shield. Christ is your steady. Christ is
This is a story in the Bible. It's probably one that you're at least a little bit familiar with, where the disciples are out on this boat in the middle of this lake, and there's a huge storm, and they're like fishermen, a lot of them, which means they know about lakes, they know about storms, and they're even freaking out. And then Jesus comes walking up to them on the water, and they're not even sure who he is. And anyway, like a whole bunch of stuff happens, and then he gets in the boat and he looks at the storm and he says, "Peace, be still." And the storm stopped. And it said they marveled. They were kind of afraid because they're like, who is this man who has power over the wind and the waves? In that moment, probably for a lot of Jewish readers, they're remembering all of these things, especially in the Psalms where it talks about the voice of God speaking over creation, that as God speaks, creation listens, specifically speaking to the wind and the waves, that God's voice, that it's silenced. And like as Christians, what we believe is that all authority, that Jesus is God and that all authority over heaven and earth belongs to him. And so here's my question this morning. Where do you need Jesus to be the God who can speak to the wind and the waves this morning? And maybe it's for you, maybe it's for your circumstances, maybe it's for what you're going through, maybe it's for our world, maybe you're just looking at things in our world and you're heartbroken by what you see and your prayer is for that. But I want to invite you this morning, let's pray together. And I want to invite you to pray, Jesus, who can speak to the wind and the waves and make them be still, that you would cry out to that Jesus right now and pray and ask for his help, for his deliverance, for his peace, for his healing, for his rest.
Christ as a lamp, Christ as a shield, Christ when I'm standing, Christ when I'm real, Christ is beside me, Christ around me,
So Jesus, we offer our prayers to you because you're the God who hears us. You're the God who saves us. You are our hope. You're our salvation. You're our strong tower. You're our deliverer. You are our fortress. You are our refuge and our place of safety. You are our source of healing and our source of life. We come to you, Jesus, because where else could we go? For you have the keys to life. We pray all this in your name. Amen. Go ahead and grab a seat. Well, good morning, all. Welcome to the porch. My name's Josh. I'm the pastor here. I just want to say welcome. Wherever you're at in your spiritual journey, this might be your first time at church or in a church in a very long time. You might be someone who's brand new to this whole God, faith, Jesus thing, or maybe you're just here checking out, trying to find a church home. Wherever you're at in your spiritual journey, whatever you have going on, we just want to say welcome and that we're glad you're here. And this is a safe place for you to take your next step toward God, whatever that next step might be. We do want to let you know, if you are new here, you're going to see a card on the seat in front of you. At some point in time this morning, grab that card, fill it out. You can just leave it on the seat, and then we will collect that later. I would love to reach out this week, introduce myself, and then you'll get added to our email and text list. You won't get barraged with stuff through those. But just fill out the card, leave it on the seat, and we'll grab that later. How are we doing this morning, y'all? Okay, yeah, all right, yeah, all right. Front row felt strong. The rest of you, I think you're okay. That's okay. There's no judgment here. I'm not pressuring you into anything. I'm just saying the front row was better. Anyway, okay, so we only got one announcement to tell you about this morning. The first is that we have a church work day coming up this Saturday on June 8th. You can see that we have a couple of different time slots there that you can sign up for, or you can sign up for both of them and be there for the whole thing. That would be great as well. Basically, we just have some stuff both inside the building and around the church grounds that need doing. And both from a financial standpoint of us not wanting to spend too much money on hiring people to do stuff because we want our money to go to the things that matter most, we could use help. And so if you are someone who's like handy with stuff and knows your way around stuff, man, we would really love to have you here. If you are like me and borderline worthless at this stuff, that's okay too. There's still ways for people like us to help. And so we would love to have you here. There is a sign-up sheet through those doors to the left where you can sign up there, and that'll help us know kind of how many people are going to be here, and will help us know about how many projects that we want to add to all of that. If you have any questions, let me know, or you can email Christina there, or this is Erin right here. She's also helping out with it. Just talk to her. And that is really it. Actually, there is one more announcement. We don't have a slide for it. But one of the things I do want to keep talking about is, as some of you all know, we are in between student pastors. We are looking for that next person. We just recently, there is an organization called Leadership Pathway that helps create residency programs for churches. And so basically, it's a 2-year residency program, and they help facilitate that whole process. So one of the ways that this could potentially work is that someone in our community or someone that you all know might be a good candidate to be a part of this residency program. It would be mostly to help with our student ministry, but honestly, there would also be some ways to help out with some other things at the church as well. It's a 2-year commitment. There is a certain stipend that goes toward all of that. If you know of someone that's interested, you can go to our website, and I think it's at the very bottom of the main page, you'll see something that says jobs, and you can click there, or it's like porch.church/jobs, I think. I will have a slide for this next week, I promise, but I want to give you an update on all of that. And in all of this, both those announcements and then just our ability to even be in this room this morning, all of that is made possible from your generosity and giving. And so for those of you who give, I just want to say thank you for that. It really is the reason that we are able to continue to do everything God's called us to do. And if you're interested in giving, you can go to porch.church/give, or check out the box in the lobby for you analog folks. That is it for the announcements. So go ahead and stand. And as you stand, remember, you're not just a bunch of people who happen to be in the same room at the same time. That we are people who are learning how to be a church family together. So find someone you don't know or don't know super well. Introduce yourself, have a conversation, be friendly. All right, go ahead and start finding a seat.
Don't tell me what to do.
Stop. Okay. Well, we have been, oh man, we have been going through a series through the book of Second Corinthians. This is week 3 of that. And so we are just going to dive right into that here in a second. But before we do that, one of the things that we're big on here is just stopping and praying and inviting God to speak to us. Because to be clear, this isn't about me and what I may or may not know. This is about us creating space for God. And so let's do that together. So I invite you just to pray a really simple prayer right now. Just pray, God, would you speak to me? And if you're not sure if God exists or if he'd want to speak to you, then God, if you are there, would you speak to me this morning? And then would you do me the honor of praying for me? That God would speak through me this morning and that I would participate in whatever it is that he is up to today. And so God, during these next few minutes, whatever it is that you would want to say or do, open our ears to that. If there's anything that I've gotten wrong, close our ears to that. What we need more than anything else, though, God, is we need you. Not just, you're always speaking, but like we need you to help us hear, to listen, to receive it, to apply it. And in all of those things, God, we're pretty dependent on you. We need you to do that stuff in us, to give us hearts that are both willing to hear and say yes. And so would you give us the gift of that this morning? Let me pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. So something we've been talking about as we read through 2 Corinthians together is that this is a letter written by this guy named Paul, right? And Paul is a theologian. He's also a church planner, and he's traveling all over the Roman Empire. And everywhere he goes, he's founding these communities, these small house churches that are centered around the message and the teachings and the life of Jesus. And we talked about this a couple weeks back, but when you're reading a message that's written between two people that you don't know, that there's some work that goes into trying to understand the context of what was happening between those people. And it's no different now. Like if you pulled out my phone and opened it up and started reading through my texts, a thing I will never let any of you do, if we did that, something that like you would realize really quickly is you don't have the context for a lot of those text messages. You don't know my relationship with that person. You don't know the backstory, the in-jokes, the references, or any of that stuff. I found a few examples, because again, we're not using my phone, but I found a few examples online of messages between people that without context and maybe even with context, are a little bit strange. And so here's one, the first one up here on the screen. It says, "Hey bro, do you still have that owl for sale?" Owl? What owl? Oh, I guess it was a dream, LOL. My favorite part about that is that it was sent at 4:42 in the morning. That apparently this person woke up straight out of the dream, convinced that that was reality. The next one is this one. Just a text from someone named Mama saying, "You watch now," followed 2 minutes later by the link, "Fat frog having spaghetti." I wasn't sure what that was, so I Googled it. It's a frog eating worms. The best part about that is the comments underneath it is like people who had seen this same meme and who are all going saying, "Mama told me to come here," in the comments. The next one that we have, "I'm busy now. I just ate glass by accident." You what? "Please leave me alone. I ate glass." This is one of those where knowing the context of all of this would be very helpful. The last one's maybe my favorite. So this starts, "Our puppy Harley came down with an unknown illness today and is not doing well. He's at the vet. Please pray for him. Lauren," presumably mom's daughter, "Oh no, hope he's okay. Whoever owns the phone, is it bad?" "Grandpa, brisket I made today." What cracks me up about that is we all know the person who does this. All of you have the person completely oblivious to the context of what's happened before. Just be like, "This is a good time to send this, I think." Anyway, the point is this, that whenever you're reading a conversation between two other people, there's work that goes into interpreting. And this is why we need to be careful about saying things like, well, the Bible just said it. The Bible is clear. Sometimes the Bible is clear. That is true. And we definitely do believe here that the Bible is God-breathed and that when we come to it, it contains nothing but truth. But that doesn't mean that just because something is true, that doesn't mean it's always clear. And so our job is to be very careful when we're doing this, to be responsible readers and to do the work to try to understand the context of what's happening. For instance, a big part of the letter of 2 Corinthians, a really huge part of it, is about a falling out that seemingly has happened between Paul and the house churches in Corinth. As a matter of fact, Paul references like a previous letter that he has written where apparently he's calling out the behavior of the Corinthians, and he's telling them that like the way you are doing things and what's happening there is not okay, and that apparently this letter is pretty harsh, that he comes pretty strong. And like because this is 2 Corinthians, you might be thinking, oh, 1 Corinthians must be that letter. No. There's actually 4 that we know of. There are 4 letters that Paul wrote to Corinth, and these are the only ones that we know of. We don't even have access to 2 of them. We only know they exist because they are referenced in the letters that we do have. And so what I'm saying is this, in some ways what's happening here is like if you've ever watched a show, like maybe your spouse or partner, someone you're dating, or like whatever, like they convince you to watch a show that they already are into, but they don't want to start it over. And so you have to jump into season 2 and context clue your way into what's going on, that in some ways that's a little bit like what we're doing today. And I'm saying all of that because this passage especially that we're about to look at has a backstory and we only know some of it. And so we're going to try to do the work to understand what's happening here a little bit better. So this is going to be 2 Corinthians 2, starting in verse 5. And Paul's going to say this, I'm not overstating it when I say that the man who caused all the trouble hurt all of you more than he hurt me. Now, like most of you opposed him, and that was punishment enough. So now, however, it's time to forgive and comfort him. Otherwise, he may be overcome by discouragement. So I urge you now to reaffirm your love for him. I wrote to you as I did to test you and see if you would fully comply with my instructions. When you forgive this man, I forgive him too. And when I forgive whatever needs to be forgiven, I do so with Christ's authority for your benefit, so that Satan will not outsmart us, for we are familiar with his evil schemes. There's a lot going on here. For instance, who is this man that Paul is referring to? We don't know. We probably aren't going to get through the entire book of 2 Corinthians in this series, by the way. This series is designed to run until August, and getting through the whole book would take us a lot longer than that. But I would encourage you to be reading this book on your own as we go. And if you do that, one of the things you're going to find is that Paul is doing 2 things in his letter. One is he's constantly expressing his love for this church. But he is also being pretty combative with a group of people who are in and around this church who are both attacking Paul and attacking the church itself. We've talked about this a lot already, but Corinth was like a status-obsessed city, and Paul has some accusers who are like tearing down Paul's reputation, saying like that Paul doesn't keep his word, he doesn't do what he says he's going to do, that his education isn't as impressive as their education is, that Paul isn't a polished enough speaker. See, Paul is like a tent maker by trade. And rather than being paid by the churches he helped plant, he just worked hard to make just enough money to survive on his own without depending on the local churches. But this was actually looked down on by a lot of people. Like, he's supposed to be this impressive leader. He's supposed to be a grand orator. He shouldn't be doing this menial blue-collar job, the people in Corinth thought. And so all of this is happening. It's like these people who are in and around the church of Corinth are just piling on all these criticisms of Paul. And keep in mind that as this is happening, that Paul is in other places in the Roman Empire, and he's being beaten, he's being imprisoned, his life is constantly in danger, all because of his conviction, all because at the center of Paul's life is this passion to tell as many people about Jesus as possible, and he's working so hard as a tent maker so that he doesn't have to depend on anyone else to help fund that while he does it. In some ways, I feel like for Paul, it's like being a parent, for those of you who are parents, where like every waking second of your life, you're thinking about your kids and how to provide for your kids, how to take care of your kids. Do they have what they need? Do they have the snacks that they need? Did the clothes get laid out? Is everything going to be okay today? You spend a significant amount of time and energy trying to anticipate every possible thing that you could to set them up to win, and then you sit down for a nice, delicious meal that you worked hard on. It's pretty creative. It's healthy because you care. You want them to grow up to be strong, healthy people, and the reaction you get in that moment is, why do you hate me? Where are my chicken nuggies? I mean, imagine, like, for Paul, where he's like, everything that I am doing is centered around the message of Jesus and doing that with integrity. But what's happening here isn't just about Paul's reputation. As a matter of fact, there's other letters that Paul writes to other churches in other cities where he basically says, like, listen, I know those people are like attacking me, but I don't even really care about that. As long as the message of Jesus is getting out there, it doesn't bother me that much. But what's happening in Corinth it's not just that these people are attacking Paul's reputation. It's that what is happening here, whatever is happening in and around the church, that it is sabotaging the truth about who Jesus is. In 2 Corinthians 11, we're jumping forward a long way in this, he's going to say this. You, the church in Corinth, you happily put up with whatever anyone tells you, even if they preach a different Jesus than the one we preach, or a different kind of spirit than the one you received, or a different kind of gospel than the one you believed. See, whoever these people are, it's not just that they're attacking Paul. Paul, in other cases, has been willing to let that go. It's that they are steering the church away from the actual message of Jesus. And what's apparently happened is that one guy in the church, there's this group around the church that's causing all these problems. There's this group around the church that's doing all this stuff. And then there's one guy in the church who's siding with these people. And he is actively trying to steer the church away from Paul's message about Jesus by attacking him. So apparently, Paul's previous letter was calling this guy out and being like, he has to stop it. This isn't okay. And also calling out the church of Corinth for going along with all this stuff. And apparently, most of the Corinthian churches responded pretty well to Paul's letter. They realized he was right, and that the guy in the church that was causing all this problem, they said that the church opposed this guy that was causing all the problems. We don't know exactly what that opposition looked like, but he was shut down. There's a pretty good chance that in that culture, he wasn't allowed to keep participating in the life of the church's community. They took what he was doing really seriously. So now that's the backstory that we had to fill in to get to what we're really going to talk about now. Because here's what I think. Considering all of that, if we try, as we talked about in week 1, to be cultural time travelers, that we're going to try to step back into this moment and imagine what's happening and imagine what that would feel like and what we would be experiencing in that moment. And then as we're doing that, we start trying to figure out what this means for us. I think it's really interesting to look at how Paul responds to this whole situation. Let's read this passage again. I'm not overstating it when I say that the man who caused all the trouble hurt all of you more than he hurt me. Most of you opposed him, and that was punishment enough. Now, however, it is time to forgive and to comfort him. Otherwise, he may be overcome by discouragement. So I urge you now, reaffirm your love for him. I wrote you as I did to test you and see if you would fully comply with my instructions. When you forgive this man, I forgive him too. And when I forgive whatever needs to be forgiven, I do so with Christ's authority for your benefit, so that Satan will not outsmart us. For we are familiar with his evil schemes. It's worth noting the fact that as far as we know, Paul and this guy who's been causing all the problems, they never talked. They never worked things out. This guy who just was dead set on not just trying to destroy Paul's reputation in the church, but drag the church away from the true message of Jesus. They never had a one-on-one where things got fixed between them. Paul has every reason in this circumstance to be like, well, good. I'm glad that guy got taken care of. Good riddance. But Paul goes out of his way to make sure the church knows, and this is really key. This is what we're going to be centered on this morning, is this. Paul wants the church to know that the primary goal in this situation is not revenge, it's reconciliation. That doesn't mean, Paul's not saying that the guy didn't need to be stopped. He's not saying he wasn't doing harm. He's not saying that there didn't need to be an action taken against him. Paul's not suggesting enabling bad or harmful behavior, but Paul is making this very clear. As followers of Jesus, our goal of justice is reconciliation, not revenge. That the goal of justice, what justice is, the definition of true justice as it's defined by God, is not something that comes out of revenge. It's something that comes out of, that it focuses, it finds its completion in reconciliation. And so Paul is making really sure the church realizes that this guy, he's paid the price for what he's done. He gets it. He has repented. He's sorry. He's done doing it. And that now it is, that Paul has no obligation to this dude. Paul owes this guy nothing. And yet Paul is going out of his way and talking to the church to be like, make sure you don't just leave this guy out there. Bring him back in. That as followers of Jesus, the goal of justice is reconciliation, not revenge. And this is incredibly significant for our lives, for our relationships, for how we deal with our family, for how we deal with friends, for how we deal with coworkers. But not just that, this has implications that spiral out well beyond the life that we live on a day-to-day basis. And this starts touching on really big stuff. Stuff about how we think about justice for communities, for countries, for the world. That when we think about what justice is, what we have to recognize that our heart's desire, our focus is not about getting even. It's not about punishment. Our heart's desire is for healing and wholeness and restoration, and that is supposed to be true in every aspect of life. Let me give you an example. Let's talk for a second about our criminal justice system. If someone has been put in prison, there is a 70% chance they will end up back in prison at some point in time in the future. Now, if we have a revenge mentality of how justice is supposed to work, that's not really our problem, right? See, the point is, someone did a bad thing, they went to jail, that's the punishment for the crime, and then what happens to them after that's not really so much our business. It's up to them to figure out how to not make mistakes, to live a better life, whatever it is that we're thinking. Basically, we kind of got ours by putting them in jail. We got our punishment. We're good. They got what's coming to them. But if as followers of Jesus, the goal of justice is reconciliation, not revenge, then it's our responsibility as a society to see that our system of justice isn't creating reconciliation at all. It's actually sometimes, a lot of times, making the problem worse. And if we as Christians believe the goal of justice is reconciliation, that means we need to be advocating for better criminal justice reform. And there's so much, super complicated, and I know, and we can't unpack that. My point is, that's one way that the premise of this plays out in really big, giant ways. Here's another example that's even a little bit more charged to our current moment, because why not? Recently, and I hope I'm not breaking this news to you, a former president of our country was convicted of a felony crime. Listen. Hold with me here. Okay. If you've been around, if you've been around here for a while, I know that you know that I am not the biggest fan of that person, but that's not the point I'm making this morning. Because here's what I saw happening, specifically on social media. I saw a liberal response to this. And what I felt in the response wasn't a joy that some small bit of justice may have been done from their point of view, or from their perspective. That wasn't it. What I saw was like a gleeful mocking, a belittling. Not just of that person, but of anyone who had ever supported him. And a lot of these people who were doing this were followers of Jesus. And then I went on Facebook, which never do that, and saw people being like, Jesus was wrongfully convicted too. And I'm like, I need a walk, and just set the computer down and walked away. But on one hand, I understand, I do. I understand that reaction that some people were feeling in that moment of this sense of I'm glad some small bit of justice may have been done. But my bigger reaction was this, is if you believe justice was done, we can rejoice that justice was done. That's fine if you think that's what happened. But the justice didn't feel like it was looking for reconciliation. It looked like it just wanted revenge. And this is the cycle. It feels like our entire political system is caught up in a cycle where there are some people who are genuinely advocating for what they believe is right and good, but the overall vibes of our country today, it doesn't feel like we're interested in justice or in rightness or in fairness. It feels like we're more interested in sticking it to the other side and getting revenge. And that mentality, that mindset, it doesn't work. No one is winning. How many of you are looking at our election that's coming up and being democracy's doing great right now? We're crushing it. We're just increasingly electing people who we think are the best boxers in a culture war boxing match. And it's not working out for anyone. No one's winning. Everyone loses when revenge becomes the dominant desire of our hearts. And Jesus called humanity to be people of justice, not people of vengeance. Advocating for justice creates an increasingly whole world, but advocating for revenge creates an increasingly shattered world. True justice longs for reconciliation, even and especially toward enemies. It never shies away, and this is important, it never shies away that things have to be set right. That's not justice. If things aren't set right, then that's not actual justice. But in its heart, what it hopes is that peace comes on the other side of the setting right, and that on the other side of restitution, on making whole, that what happens is that there is healing that happens. Revenge doesn't want any of that. Revenge wants to win. It wants to humiliate. It wants to dominate. It wants to subjugate. Revenge isn't trying to even the playing field. Revenge is taking a lopsided playing field and just flipping it over. And as followers of Jesus, the goal of our hearts is reconciliation, not revenge. This is true in our relationships too, right? When someone hurts us, it is right and good to want the wrong that was done to be made right. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's say that I say something that is hurtful to you. And maybe I was sarcastic and I meant it as a joke and I didn't realize how it came across, but it really bothered you. It's right and good for you to come to me and tell me that happened. And it's my job in that situation to try to fix the harm that I've done. And so if it was just you, if it's just you and me, then it's my job to, between you and me, just say man, I'm so sorry, I blew it, I'll try really hard not to do that again. If I did it in front of a group of people, my responsibility then is in front of that same group of people to say, I'm sorry, I messed up, I shouldn't have done that. Because the damage, what was made wrong in that situation was among a group of people. And so if I'm genuinely gonna try to set it right, setting it right means doing it in front of everyone. Because I made that person look bad in front of a bunch of other people. It's good to want things like that. It's good in relationships to want things to be made right. That's justice. But oftentimes what happens is that the idea of pursuing rightness in our relationships feels way too vulnerable. And instead, the hurt goes internal. And it starts turning into a grudge against this person. There's this part of us that wants to make it right, but we're not gonna do it by actually talking about it. And so we're just gonna find ways to sort of get little digs in at them here and there. We're gonna let them know through our coldness or through our distance, through the removal of the relationship that we're upset. But we're not actually trying to make the thing that was wrong right. And at that point in time, when we start doing stuff like that, It actually makes justice and reconciliation, the thing we really want, it makes it impossible because the actual wound, the actual injustice isn't being dealt with. And on the flip side of that, it means that if you're the person that did the wrong thing, so often when we do something that's wrong, we feel an intense guilt and an intense shame over our actions, and we can't own up to that feeling. We're afraid that we're going to be attacked. We're afraid that whatever justice looks like, it's going to be more than our egos can handle. And so we hide from the wrong thing we've done. And when we do that in that moment, we've decided that justice and reconciliation take too much courage, and we're not willing to do it. But as followers of Jesus, the goal of justice is reconciliation, not revenge, which means that we have to own our mistakes, the Bible would say, sins against each other. But this doesn't just apply to like big, giant cultural country stuff, and it doesn't just apply to our individual relationships. There's also an implication for us as a church, as a community, as a family. It means that as a church, we're to be a place that insists on justice within our community, but that justice is always in the service of reconciliation. I'm not going to go too far into the details in the story I'm about to share, but a few years ago, there was a situation here where some people in our church community were being emotionally and verbally abused. There's some people who are being emotionally and verbally abusive to other people in our community. And we had to put up barriers. That was like, you can't keep doing that. That's not okay. And they got mad and they left and in some ways tried to do a lot of damage on their way out. And I was mad. I was angry. I personally felt hurt and wronged in the process, but I also felt intensely protective over the people who had been hurt by all of this. What I wanted in that moment was vengeance. It's like, Lord, strike them down, that kind of stuff. But here's the deal. If you go on our website right now, you're going to see this phrase. It's a really nice phrase. It says, everyone gets to be near Jesus. Isn't that great? Doesn't that feel so good? It does until you have to start living it. Because that applies to those people too. Dang it. And so in my heart, I had to decide, it's like, are we going to be a church that cares about revenge or about reconciliation? Which one do we care about most? And so as the pastor, what I had to commit myself to doing, not because I felt it, by the way, not because I wanted to do it, not because I'm some incredibly emotionally healthy human, but with gritted teeth and force of will, I would just pray regularly. God, I pray your best, whatever your best is, over those people. Because here's the deal. I knew that if God really did bring his best into their life, and if they really did respond to it, that could not help but change their hearts in a way where they would realize the hurt that they had caused. It would make them want to make things right. See, when God's blessing in our life shows up, when God's goodness in our life shows up, when God really does step into our world, it cannot help but reorient our hearts towards the things that are right. And over a year later, one of the people who was involved in that situation came back and went to several people that they had hurt, and without defensiveness and with no self-justification, owned the harm that they had caused and apologized. And while that person didn't ultimately end up rejoining our church community, our church family, like I told him then, and it continues to be true, he will always and forever be welcome here. Because as followers of Jesus, the goal of justice is reconciliation, not revenge. We have to be that way. We can't not be that way. It is impossible. If you are committing your life to the way of Jesus, it is impossible for you not to constantly be drawn back into this reality. Why? Because that's how Jesus did it. Luke 23, there are two others, both criminals, were led out to be executed with Jesus, and they came to a place called the Skull. And they nailed Jesus to the cross, and the criminals were also crucified, one on his right and one on his left. And in this moment in which Jesus is being tortured to death for something he did not even do, he prays this to the people who are mocking him: Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And in that statement right there, Jesus is revealing something that's going to show up in the Bible over and over and over again. And it actually, I don't know if you caught this weird part of this passage we keep looking at in 2 Corinthians, but it's in there too. Paul says this: when you forgive this man, I forgive him too. And when I forgive whatever needs to be forgiven, I do so with Christ's authority for your benefit. I don't know what some of that means, by the way, and I'm not going to talk about it. So we're just going to move on. Sorry. Maybe I'll get smart someday and we can circle back around to it. But right now, don't know. But this is the part I want us to catch. So that Satan will not outsmart us, for we are familiar with his evil schemes. Now, honestly, this is a topic I struggle to talk about some too, because I actually think this whole spiritual world stuff is a lot more complex than it's often made out to be, a lot more mysterious. But what we see regularly in the Bible is that behind the world that we live in, that there is a spiritual reality. And specifically in this case, that there are evil spirits, that there is a malevolent spiritual force that is trying to harm this world. And this evil spirit is often referred to as the Satan, which literally just means adversary, accuser. One of Jesus' closest followers, Peter, he's going to say this, that this Satan, this adversary, this accuser, that he roams through our earth like a lion looking for people to devour. Paul in Ephesians, in his letter to the churches in Ephesus, he's going to say that there are spiritual systems of power at work in our world that are attempting to steer this world toward destruction. See, God's heart is always, 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 always for wholeness, for healing, for reconciliation, for things being made new, which means that these evil spiritual forces, their goal is the exact opposite of that. God's goal is the wholeness of his creation. Satan's goal is the disintegration of creation. If God wants things to be made new, then the spiritual evil force, it is trying to decreate, deconstruct, devolve, dissolve, tear down, destroy. If you've ever seen the movie, I just watched it last night. If you've ever seen the movie The Dark Knight, think of that line from Michael Caine talking about the Joker. I wish I could do a Michael Caine impression for you, but it's not going to happen today. Where he says that some men just want to watch the world burn. That's kind of the whole definition of the Joker in that movie, right? There's no end, there's no goal, there's no different counter version of reality. See, there are some philosophies out there, and I'm not trying to pick on any other philosophy or religion. That's not what we're really about here. But I will say one of the things that differentiates Christianity, it's we don't believe in a yin and a yang, where there's white and there's dark, where there's good and bad, and they're sort of they have equally valid premises and are kind of duking it out. We don't believe that at all. What we believe is that reality is good, because God created things and he made them good. That is reality. The only thing that exists other than that is the destruction of reality. It has no end other than to destroy, and that's it. There is nothing interesting about evil. Evil and its end is just the destruction of everything. And so on the cross, what Jesus is saying is that these people who are crucifying them, they don't even realize that they are a part. Yes, they are accountable for their choices and actions, but they are also participating in a power, in a system, in a spiritual evil. And that spiritual evil's goal is just to destroy everything that's good. And so in Ephesians, Paul is going to say this: for we are actually not fighting. And this is why Paul, by the way, is able to talk about this guy that we've been talking about the way he does, because he's going to say, for we are not actually fighting against flesh and blood enemies. So who are we fighting against? Evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in heavenly places. See, as Christians, our enemy is never a person. Ever. It's a systemic spiritual evil that lurks behind people, behind systems, behind policies, behind structures, behind cities and communities and countries in the world, and the way leadership works and the way systems work. Why are all of our systems and structures so broken? Why are we as human beings so incapable of bringing about actual justice ourselves? There's a few reasons for it. One of them, though, is this, is that there is a spiritual evil working behind our world that is sabotaging those systems and structures and weaponizing them to cause destruction instead of wholeness. And so because of that, Paul takes this idea and he brings it into this one-on-one conversation with this person in Corinth, and he says this, that we are going to forgive this guy, and when we forgive him, we're doing that so that Satan is not going to outsmart us because we're familiar with his schemes. What's his point here? That we need to be very, very, very careful in the way that we go about pursuing justice, because if we are not careful, what's going to happen is we're going to start buying into the idea that people are our enemies, when the reality is that people are a part of God's creation and that God's heart for them is reconciliation. God hates the evil that is lurking behind our world. He loves people, all people, everyone. So we have to be very, very careful, because what can happen as we chase after what we think is just and right, and by the way, as we enter into a political season, this might be really important to hold on to tightly. That as we chase after what we believe is just and right, there's nothing wrong with advocating for what you believe justice to be. That is good. And for us to do the hard work of trying to ask, what does justice look like for Jesus, and how do we live that out? And that's complicated and messy, but what we need to be very, very careful to do is not buy into the idea that there is a person who is our enemy and that we're going to try to destroy them and get even with them. Because for followers of Jesus, our goal is reconciliation, not revenge. And what we are fighting is a spiritual reality, not people. As we close in Matthew 5:9, Jesus in his Sermon on the Mount, the whole Sermon on the Mount is Jesus basically just saying, like, you think the world works like this, and just like flipping it over on its head. It's great. It's probably my favorite part of the Bible. And he's going to say, like, you know who's actually blessed in God's kingdom? The impoverished and the poor and the left behind. Why? Because God's kingdom is first and foremost for them. Isn't that good news? Oh man, if you want justice, if you long for it, then good news, because in God's kingdom, justice is going to be done. Man, and it's like he's just going through all these things, like blessed actually are the merciful. Blessed actually are the weak and the meek and the powerless. Those are the people who are actually blessed. And then he's going to say this, God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. And here's the question I want to ask us this morning. And please know, I wish I could say I'm on the right side of this one, and so often I'm not. But the question I want to ask is this. Do our hearts long for peace? Not peace without justice. I'm not saying that. That's not peace. That's fake. Peace without justice is like actually just oppression. Like that's not what actual peace looks like. But peace that like recognizes justice is needed, but longs for reconciliation on the other side of that. Is that what our hearts long for? Is that what it longs for in your relationships with the people around you? Is that what it longs for at work? Beyond that, though, do we have a vision of this that stretches beyond our personal relationships and goes into how we view the world around us? Does it go in how we look at our political reality? Does it go in how we see our communities? Does it affect how we see our criminal justice system? Does, as we go in the world, start looking and asking, are we moving toward revenge or reconciliation? Which version of justice is it? Because the one that's revenge ultimately isn't justice at all. Is your heart longing for peace? Is that what is motivating and driving you? Let's pray. And what I invite you to do right now is just to do a little bit of self-examination. Because here's the deal, like a justice that really actually wants revenge and a justice that really actually wants reconciliation, they kind of look the same at first. It's not until they stretch out for a while that the difference becomes obvious. And so we have to do the hard work of asking, do I just want to get even? Am I just mad? Or is there a part of me that's like, I long for justice, not just because that would be best for me, not just that because that would be best for the people who are being hurt, but do I long for justice because true justice ultimately is what's best for everyone? Is there an area where you just need to pray and let go of hatred, vengeance, stubbornness, selfishness? And say, Jesus, I need you to change this part of my heart and help me long for peace. I can give you a second to talk to God. We talk about this a lot here, but it's really hard to keep just only wanting vengeance for someone if you start praying for them regularly. And so one of the things I'd invite you to do right now is if there's a person or a group of people that you have almost like a hatred for or a deep bitterness toward, just be like, God, would you help me to see these people the way that you see them? Pray God's blessing for them. God, whatever your best is for them, I pray that over them right now. Is there an area where you need to make something right with someone? Or you need to be honest about a hurt that you're feeling with someone? And you need courage to lean into that moment. Pray and ask God for that as well. Let's stand together as we stand and sing.
Let me be filled with kindness and compassion for the one for whom you loved and gave your son for humanity. Increase my love and help me to love with open arms like you do. A love that erases all the lines and sees the truth. Only when they look in my eyes, they won't see you. Even in just a smile, they will feel the Father's love. Oh, how you love us. From the homeless to the famous and in between. You formed us, you made us carefully. 'Cause in the end, we're all your children. So help me to love with open arms like you do. A love that erases all the lines and sees the truth. Oh, that when they look in my eyes, they would see you. Even in just a smile, they would feel the Father's love. So help me to love with open arms like you do. A love that erases all the lines and sees the truth. Oh, that when they look in my eyes, they would see you. Even in just a smile, they would feel the Father's love. Let all my life So help me love with open arms like you do. A love that erases all the lines and sees the truth. Oh, that when they look in my eyes, they would see you. Even in just this moment, they would feel God's love.
At the end of every service, we have a benediction that we say. If you're up for it, just hold out your hands to receive this blessing. As you enter a world of scarcity and fear, may you remember that God is good and will provide you with all that you need. When you doubt that God is good, may you turn your eyes toward Jesus and see the fullness of who God is in him. When you're told to hoard your time and money, may you give them extravagantly instead. And when you are told to hate your enemy, may you remember that you are free to love them instead. May you remember that Jesus is not the property of any political party and that we are to love our neighbor, which includes those we passionately disagree with. And may you remember that you are a child of the King of this world and the next, that the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is at work in you, and that where you go, the spiritual powers of this world must flee before the presence of the resurrected Jesus in you. May you be filled with Holy Spirit. And may you shine brightly in your homes and at your work and in your life. I claim this blessing over you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. If you are looking for prayer, we have a prayer team that will be right over here in this corner. As you exit, remember we have that sign up out there. Have a great week.